everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is presented to you by Lawsico. Today, we will discuss two articles. The first article is from the Hindu newspaper, which is titled as Relief and Recompense. This article talks about the efforts that were taken by the Supreme Court of the country in order to relieve the people and various kinds of victims of the COVID-19, be it the migrants or the people who have lost their kins. So, what were the steps taken by the Supreme Court and how active has the Indian judiciary been in this case will be discussed in this article. The second article is from the Indian Express, which is titled as Rule of Law versus Rule by Law. So basically, the difference between rule of law and rule by law will be discussed in this article, and which is the ideal one, keeping in mind the context of Indian Constitution, shall be discussed here. Also, let's note that the second article, which is Rule of Law versus Rule by Law, has been written by Justice N.V. Ramanna, who is the current Chief Justice of India. And thus, let's move forward with it. So this newspaper analysis is presented by me. My name is Sheba Khan. I am a law graduate and had completed my law degree in the year 2019. I have been a national level debater and a public speaker. And if you wish to connect with me, you can find me on my Twitter as well as LinkedIn handles. The links to both are available in the description box below. So this is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Disaster Management Act was brought in the year. Your options are 2004, 2005, 2010, or 2019. If you know the answer, you can put it down in the comment section below. This is a descriptive question of the day. What difference do you understand between rule of law and rule by law? Which one do you think is more with the spirit of Indian Constitution? If you wish to download the PDF of these slides, you can join our Telegram channel. The link to this channel is available in the description box below, or you can simply scan this QR code which you can see on your screens. Also, you can avail various other kinds of study materials like the current affairs newsletters, quizzes, etc. on a daily basis if you join this Telegram channel. Also, do not forget us to follow us on Judiciary, CLAT Prep, as well as UGC.net Instagram channels for more such updates. So let's start our discussion about the COVID-19 relief and compensation. So as we know that the Supreme Court ordered the central government to perform its statutory duty of fixing compensation for the families of those who lost their kins to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here, as we know that there are three sectors, or in a way, there are three sides of the government of India, or basically the constitution. First is the Indian judiciary. The second is the legislature. And the third is the executive. Now, as we know that we follow the system of checks and balances, wherein one organ of the government or one organ of the constitution tries to keep a check on the other organ of the constitution in order to make sure that none of them enjoys arbitrary powers, and thus there is a balance of power created. In this situation as well, when it was seen that maybe the central government, being the legislature and the executive as well, it is forgetting its duty to take care of the people, specifically in order to compensate the families for those who had lost their kins to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Indian judiciary, that was the third organ of the government of the constitution, came into the play, and the Supreme Court ordered the central government to perform its statutory duty. Now, hereby statutory duty means that a duty that is fixed upon the central government by the law. So basically, it was the legal duty and not just what we can call as a moral or simple social duty. Rather, it is the legal or statutory duty of the central government to compensate such families. So let's understand about the court order, and let's see that what was the argument initially given by the government, which was ultimately rejected by the Supreme Court. So the government argued that it was facing inadequacy of financial resources. Now, as we know that be it the central government or the state governments, when the pandemic had hit hard, the economy had shut down completely. And as we know that already, even before the lockdown, India was not going through a very good economic system. In such a situation, there was definitely huge financial crunch that the government had to face, and that is why it tried to take a play of that as well, and it put forward the inadequacy of financial resources that it was facing. But it was outrightly rejected by the government because this was one thing which could not be overcome or which could not be overlooked just because of the inadequacy, and that is why it was completely rejected by the Supreme Court. And also, the government argued that the decision to prioritize expenditure in response to the pandemic was more in order to compensate the families, and that is why the government it brought forward the fact that it was already spending huge amount of money in order to respond effectively to the pandemic. But still, the Supreme Court said that the families had to be compensated no matter what, and thus it reminded the central government with its duty to do so. Also, we remember that in the initial days of the lockdown, which was in last year March, so at that time what happened was that the migrant workers, because of the lockdown, were not able to reach their hometowns. And of course, because of the lockdown, all the industries, all the working setups were shut down, and thus they had nothing to eat, nowhere to work, and nowhere to go. And in such a situation also, the Supreme Court of the country had taken suo motu cognizance of the plight of the migrant workers. Now, here, by suo motu proceedings or suo motu cognizance, we simply mean that the Supreme Court or the judiciary itself, on its own self, took this cognizance and moved forward for bringing the relief to the migrant workers. So earlier, it dealt with the need for a comprehensive registration for all interstate and unorganized workers in the country. And while disposing of the suo motu proceedings on the misery of the laborers, it has now fixed deadline of December 21, 2021 for all the states and union territories to complete the registration process of all the people who are returning back as migrant workers to them. Now let's understand that what was the real significance of the verdict which was brought by the Supreme Court. Firstly, it opens up the possibility that the interstate and unorganized workers will at last be able to reap the benefits of welfare laws enacted for them. Because obviously, when they are moving to and from one state to another, they mostly miss out on various beneficial laws or various schemes that the government had actually brought for their benefit. And now, if at all they will be registered in a proper and in a formal manner, it will become possible for the government to penetrate these benefits and these various schemes which were actually and ultimately made for their benefit. And secondly, it signifies the rejuvenation and assertion of judicial activism. Definitely, this can be a very, very good example when we talk about the latest times about the judicial activism. Because whenever the Supreme Court has taken, or any court has taken cognizance on its own, that amounts to be a case of judicial activism, wherein the courts or the judiciary, they do not just sit upon the law and say that because there is no law upon a particular thing, so we cannot act or interpret it. Rather, it chooses to become judicially active and ask the government to make laws in that regard or work in that particular direction. Another very good example of this judicial activism was the Vishakha guideline case, which was against the state of Rajasthan, wherein the court itself had taken the cognizance of the matter, and it had brought forward the fact that we did not really have a law in hand for sexual harassment at workplaces. And that is why it was via the means of judicial activism that these guidelines were given and ultimately laws were formed for that. Example, POSH. With this, let's discuss the second article of the day, which talks about rule of law versus rule by law. Now, in the face of a pandemic, it is important to reflect on how the tension between rule of law and rule by law defines the quality of justice. Now, as we know that the rule of law is a concept which was given by A.V. Dicey, and this is mostly the concept which we in the Indian Constitution follow as well. And rule by law is something that we do not really appreciate to be followed. Now let's understand that what do we actually understand and what do we actually mean by the difference between rule of law and rule by law. So basically, it is a tool of social control backed by the sovereign. So if generally we talk about the rule of law, it is a tool of social control which is backed by the sovereign. Now, who here is the sovereign? Sovereign is the constitution. Sovereign are the people of the country. And thus it can be used not only to render justice, but only to justify the operation. Now here, if in general sense, we talk about that what do we mean by law? So generally, just law is a tool of social control, and we would call it law as a law if it is backed by the sovereign. But there is one thing that is always attached with any particular law, that it can at one place be used to render justice, to impart or to give justice to the people. But at the very same time, it can also be used to justify operation and arbitrariness. And that is why here comes the play of rule of law or rule by law. Now, in both the things, be it the rule of law or rule by law, the law remains the same. The meaning of the law remains the constant. But how it is applied in the society, that changes. And that completely changes the scenario of the entire legal system. So, if we talk about the renowned scholars, they say that a law cannot really be classified as a law unless it imbibes within itself ideals of justice. See, in the earlier times as well, when there was monarchy and everything, even then they had their own kinds of laws, but still many a times they did not take in care of the humanitarian basis or the human rights. For example, a person was punished, or an accused or a convict was punished, it was completely in not into the proportion of the crime that he had committed. For example, if he had spoken a lie, then his tongue would be cut. If he might have done something against the state or against the king, then he might be put into burning oil. So all of these things, they were also laws according to the back then legal system. But were they also humanitarian? Were they also in line with the ideals of justice? No, absolutely not. And that is why the scholars say that a law cannot really be classified as a literal law unless it brings with itself the ideals of justice. So, if in particular we talk about the rule of law, so this is a state that is governed by law, backed by the sovereign, tempered by certain ideals or tenets of justice. Now, here it has all the things that it is governed by the law, it is backed by the sovereign, and it also has the ideals or the qualities of justice. And that is why it is considered to be as the rule of law. And the struggle of independence marked the journey towards the establishment of the state defined by rule of law, and thus the framework to bind the law and the justice in the country. And that is why what we prefer in the Indian system of constitution as well is the rule of law, that whatever is the law, that shall rule. And in if we talk about the rule by law, so it is actually some other people, some other state actors, some other state or non-state actors, or be it any background players that actually use their laws to govern the people. So basically they try to rule the people by the means of law, and actually it is not the law in the real sense that rules the people. So if we talk about the rule by law, it was used by the British colonial power as a tool of political repression, enforcing it unequally. A very good example of this in the current situation is the law of sedition. Now, as we know that under section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, we have the sedition. And we very much know that the law of sedition was brought by the Britishers to suppress the Indian uprisings against the British rule. And that is why anything, if was said against the government, the then established government, then it would amount to sedition. And then it was one of the ways of the colonial government to govern the people or to oppress the people by this law. And that is why in the current situation also we discuss so many times about the sedition, that it is completely a colonial rule. And in current situation, when we guarantee the freedom of speech and expression as a fundamental right to the citizens of the country, at this particular time having a law just as contrary to it in the name of sedition is one of the examples of rule by law and not rule of law. So I hope that by this example, now you are clear with the idea of rule of law and rule by law. Now, a very good example of rule of law is the Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which talks about the right to equality. So no matter what, who are we talking about, everyone shall be treated equally in front of the eyes of law. And this is the rule of law, right? So judicial review is the rule of law, but sedition, for example, or unlawful activities prevention act, so such misuses of law, these are ruled by law. So there are four principles basically of the rule of law. First is that law must be clear and accessible, that the people at least ought to know what the laws are. See, obviously, not unless we know what the laws are, we would not be able to follow them or disobey them. So, be whatever the case be, it is important that firstly, legal awareness is done or taken care of. And secondly, that the laws are very much clear in their nature and their definition and meaning as well. Secondly, equality before law, so which means that including equal access to justice and gender equality as well. Third, right to participate in the creation and refinement of laws. So just like in the Indian situation as well, we via the means of direct and indirect elections, we bring in the members of the parliament, the state legislature, etc. And then we give them the duty to frame laws for us. So, in a way, we are given a right to participate via the means of open elections. Fourthly, presence of a strong independent judiciary, and ultimately, definitely, as we say, that this is sine qua non, which means that it is unavoidable and it is very much essential to have an independent judiciary in order to make sure that no arbitrary laws prevail in the country. So if we talk about few concluding remarks, so all the three organs of the constitution are responsible to protect the constitutional values, be it the judiciary, the legislature, or the executive. And for independent judiciary, we should have complete freedom of the judiciary, the judges, and the judicial system as well. And the judges should not be swayed by public opinion, and no media trials should take place. And definitely, whatever holds right in the spirit of the law should be the one that should come out as a verdict of the judiciary, and not just what the media or the people are saying or demanding. So this was all for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channels for such more daily updates. Thank you so much.